Hello and welcome to Mindful Living, where we explore the art of living with the intention, balance, and inner peace. I am Avik, your host, guiding you through conversations on health, meditation, mental well being, mindfulness, and the mind body connection. Each episode features expert insights to help you grow, heal, and thrive. So, take a deep breath, relax, and join us on this journey to a more mindful and fulfilling life. So, let's get started.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Mindful Living podcast, where we explore the intersection of mindfulness, mental health, and personal transformation. I'm your host, Sana, and today we have a deeply insightful and transformative conversation lined up for you. We are joined by Jason Stanley, a behavioral science expert with over 40 years of research into the cause and cure of obesity. Jason's groundbreaking work focuses on healing the root cause of emotional eating through neural plasticity and havening therapy, a powerful approach to changing long held brain patterns developed in childhood that drive obesity. Jason's clinical trial has shown an 85% success rate in treating chronic emotional eating, a striking contrast to the 3% long term success of just conventional weight loss methods available around us. And today on this podcast, we'll dive deep into how childhood brain patterns contribute to weight gain, why traditional therapies fail, and how Havening therapy offers a permanent solution to break the cycle of emotional eating. So, Jason, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor having you with us.
Thank you so very much, Don. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
Lovely. So, Jason, your research on obesity, it spans decades, beginning with your medical anthropology field study in 1979. So, can you share what first attracted you, drew you to study the childhood brain patterns linked to obesity?
Sure. I got started because I needed to do a paper in college. I was in university and I simply had to do something. And I was an older returning student. So I had gone through the military and came back. And I really, quite frankly, did not have library skills. And that was before the internet. So I convinced my professor to let me go out and do field work. I was very comfortable talking to people, but I wasn't comfortable in the library doing research.
Mhm.
And so it was simply because of my inadequacy, to put it very bluntly, that I wound up accidentally creating this research project for live obese women. And in
Mhm.
that study, and I went out with a hypothesis, and that's what was the common hypothesis of the day, that people were obese because they were eating the same foods that their parents ate. And great, that was going to be an easy thing to do. Well, I went out and talked to women, and the third person I talked to, she shattered all of the hypotheses that I had. She didn't fit,
Oh.
nothing fit. And that's science, which was exciting, because you go out, you come up with what you think is going to make sense. You go out and you prove it or you disprove it. Well, I immediately disproved the ideas that I had, which was this whole connection between diet and history. But in that conversation, she opened up a thing that I had never thought about, and I've been following up on ever since. So that was 44 years ago. I hate to say how long this, but what happened was we were talking, and as an anthropologist, different than sociologist, if I may take that real brief detour, sociology goes out with a very fixed set of questions and they ask about those questions. Now, I'm not trying to say that's wrong, it's just that's the pattern, that's the methodology. Where anthropology goes out anywhere in the world with these open ended questions and they let the interviewer kind of direct, maybe not the interviewer, but or interviewee, but the answers
Mhm.
direct the direction of the conversation. Well, I was talking to this woman and she started talking about what a horrible childhood she had as compared to, normal. And so I followed that up. And thing is, it turned out that 100% of the women who I studied, and that first early study was only 54 women, but statistically, that's quite significant. 100% of them came with the same situation, and that is they were all stressed, and all of them
Mm-hmm.
had solace or comfort or happiness or love. They were accepted as a child while eating. Now, the later thing that turned out that you didn't need the high stress. That was just that group understanding they were from a very earlier culture. But the part about being accepted while eating, that has steadfast in not only my research, but in other larger studies as well. So that's what got me started was just a intellectual curiosity and
Mm-hmm.
fortuitousness. It's just that it so fascinated me, I was never able to stop talking about it. And as I traveled around the world and lived around the world, I would ask people from different cultures
Mm-hmm.
to these long, lifelong interviews. And lo and behold, it didn't matter if it was in Asia or
Uh-huh.
Latin or the United States, it was always the same repeatable patterns or repeated patterns with the obese person, the obese adult. Always came from a place where childhood eating was the safest, sometimes the most enjoyable, always the place where they had the most acceptance as a child.
Hmm.
Started, and that's how I've stayed in it. Now, and I have stayed in it. It's been 44 years. I haven't stayed in it directly all this time, but I have. Every once in a while, every few years, I'll write another book on it. I'll do more research. I'll do another set of, and then I'll do another clinical trial. And I got to tell you, it failed miserably. The early clinical trials where you think you got it wired, figured it out. Oops, you don't. But again, that's science.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And this is really groundbreaking, Jason. Um, and you mentioned that emotional eating patterns are established in childhood. That's
Yes.
what you deduced from your research. Um,
Yes.
Can you explain how these early experiences create those brain patterns that lead to chronic weight gain, especially in adulthood? And just a quick question: so, are these gender specific, or this is across all the genders?
Yes, yes, it is across all genders. In my
Mm.
research, it turns out that in the United States, where we have really, really good numbers, it's about 51% of the obese population is male.
Mm-hmm.
So, just tiny, slightly over half are men. But it turns out on the other side, about 90% of the participants in weight loss programs is female. So women do something about it, men just live with it. And but yes, it crosses genders. And my research, which kind of matches those numbers, is who I've worked with and who we've had this success with. It's about 90% of the women of the participants are women. A little bit lower than that, but in general, yeah, close to 90%. So that, yes, it is across gender, and the 90-10 in participation, I believe, is probably an American phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
because the machismo and stoicism, etc., that's part of the American culture. But it has nothing to do with the actual success of the program or the process. Because as you talk to men and women, you find that they're equal in the responses to when do they gain the most weight. And the answer to that is when they're stressed, and it's not peak stress. So it's not like
Mm-hmm.
you went on a skiing trip and you broke your leg, or you
Mm-hmm.
had a you got into a big fight with your kids or your spouse. That doesn't what it does, Sana, is that it's the deep, grinding, slow burning stress, such as a family situation where you have a parent or a child or a loved one who is chronically ill, or a divorce. You hear it all the time. Divorces, in America, again, I'm just leaning on where I know the statistics, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure it's pretty globally. The legal process takes at least a year in America. And if
Yes.
it's contentious, that's where people really put on the weight. Or at work, where there's a large project, a 6, 8, 10 month project. it's high stress. People pack on the weight in that low grinding stress. You get into a wreck, you're going to go home and eat 2 cheeseburgers, but then tomorrow you're okay. Um,
Hmm.
it's the binging and the grazing and the going back for seconds or thirds day after day after day when under stress.
Hmm. That is worrisome. That is worrisome.
Yes.
Okay. Some might argue that obesity is primarily a matter of personal responsibility and discipline. Eat less, exercise more. How do you respond to those who believe that emotional eating is just an excuse for poor lifestyle choices?
Well, there's two types of people that will make that statement. One is the person who's obese and has just learned to beat themselves up. They've lost faith because they've been beat up so much by the naturally thin or the natural eater. You see, the
Hmm.
natural eater walks away from food when they're stressed. It doesn't bother them. They just, I'm full, and they walk away. Or even go all the way to the person who had that childhood environment where they were stressed while eating. Dinner time was always a bad time. Now, when they grow up, they get under that high stress and they can't eat. So those people who are natural eaters or who are stress not eaters, they say, all you gotta do is just walk away. It's easy. Shut up. They get really rude and ugly about it. But the fact is, when you're stressed, it is a compulsion, which is orders of magnitude more powerful than an addiction. And it is, yeah, of course, the lifestyle itself is there. Yeah, you're overeating, but you're overeating when you're stressed, and it's not something that you can control. So for someone, especially in this day and age, to say, oh, just fix your lifestyle, change your diet, and for God's sakes, get off your lazy bottom and go to the gym. That's just cruel. That's foolishness. That's meanness. That's small mindedness. I hate to be so negative about it. It just hurts my heart when I hear people make those kinds of statements. So, bottom line, this is what I say to everyone who first starts with me, and I say it on my YouTube channel. By the way, the channel's not up yet, but I'm doing the recording. Is that it's not your fault. It's not your fault. This was patterned in childhood. It's in a part of the brain that called the amygdala. For those of you who are kind of geeky in that way, it's the amygdala, and the amygdala does not. Let me reemphasize that it does not understand language. So you can promise yourself how many, every day, today's the day. You can promise yourself, I'm going to stop eating when I'm full. You can go to a therapist. You can go to social programs, all of those. And those are all operating on conversation, education, a convincing of the situation, logic, all of that, and it's all based in language. Social programs like Weight Watchers, etc., they're all based in language. That part of the brain doesn't understand language. It only understands when I'm stressed. That part of the brain recognizes any kind of stress, internal stress, I'm so fat, I hate myself, or the job is stressed, or the divorce is stressed, whatever's going on. It interprets that as danger. That's all it knows is danger or safety. And when it feels danger, it takes it as safety. It's not your fault. So people who tell you it's lifestyle, they're operating from either a place of genuine meanness or most likely most people, and I would say really, really most people, it's a matter of just not knowing. It's a matter of lack of education. But it's not.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. So moving on to your happening therapy, you have had a breakthrough with this. And for listeners and for me as well, we are unfamiliar with this approach. So if you can explain how it works, especially in terms of neuroplasticity and how it addresses emotional eating at its core.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. And you're right. Very few people have heard of havening. Many people have heard of EMDR. That's eye movement repatterning.
Mm-hmm.
It's eye movement and repatterning. Now, what's going on when you do that is accepted by the American Psychiatric Association. It's been around for quite a while. And when you move your eyes laterally, left to right, hold your head still, move your eyes all the way to the right, all the way to the left. And the therapist use like a blinking light so you can focus on that back and forth. Not hypnotic, it's just easy to go side to side. What is occurring when you do that is you are creating a delta wave in the brain. Delta wave is a normal brain wave. It's not the brain wave that you and I are in right now, but it's the deepest, slowest brain wave that we go into it in our deep sleep every night. We go there night after night after night. So it's normal. And that's when we do a lot of healing in the brain. Well, havening is simply the much more modern version of that. Turns out that if we stimulate certain parts of the skin, you can do it by rubbing with your fingers, a vibrating pad, but just you have your hands at the end of your arm, so use them. So you rub across the forehead or across the upper planes of the cheek. Think of a man with a beard. So you would rub the cheek where there is above, right below the eye, above the cheekbones, where there's no beard. So that part of the cheek or the outside edges of the arm, just stroking the arm from the shoulder down to the elbow, or rubbing the palm. Listeners can look at their own hand and say, wait a minute, the palm of my hand is a very different skin than the back of my hand. It's very different. Well, it has different nerve endings in there. So when you stimulate that just simply by rubbing your hands together, you're creating this delta wave in the brain. Now, that alone is not a therapy. That's just creating the delta wave. When you create delta wave and you activate a particular memory, let's say it's a traumatic memory, and the trauma encodes chemically. It actually locks in special chemicals in the neurons where the energy jumps across from one neuron to the next. That's called the synapse. So you get a little jump there, like a small bridge, but it's an air gap. And when that jumps across, it has to get into the molecule that jumps across, a literal physical molecule, has to get inside that next neuron and go on down and do its job. Well, if you are thinking about this thing, in my case, what we're doing is we're thinking about, when I was 7 years old and I was having a great time and it was dinner, or I was watching cartoons and I'm eating, sometime that was fun and pleasant and I was zero stress, I was happy and I was accepted, I was loved while eating throughout childhood. This has to happen during childhood, but it happens on a basis. Those pathways become highways because they lock in the chemicals that make that structure permanent. But if you think about that, Christmas dinner or whatever the holiday is, wherever you are, that's a big social time, or it's a holiday time, or it's this weekly celebration, religious celebration, and you're having a great day when you're 7 years old. And you can count on this every week. So you bring that memory up and you're thinking about it, and you're not trying to record, well, we did this, then this, then this. No, when this happened, I felt this way. When this happened, I felt that way. So you really engage in your emotions from your adult perspective, but looking back at it. When my aunt held my hand, and she's my favorite aunt because she always listened to me, I felt so warm and I felt so comfortable and I felt so loved. And you're at the same time. What that does is the delta wave then brings out of the brain another chemical that dissolves those bridges. It only happens in the delta. You can't just bring the memory up because you're just now going up and down that same memory and that same pathway, and it just strengthens it from use. But if you introduce the delta wave at the same time, which is the havening touch, and that's researched in independent laboratories, and we know exactly, because if you rub a different part of the body, let's say the backside or your elbow, it does not increase the delta wave at all. So you have to rub in the certain spots with that certain type of skin. And the cheeks is a good example, just like your hand. Above the cheekbones, there's no follicles, no hair follicles or no beard. Women have hair follicles on their cheeks. So it's the different kind of skin. Anyhow, so you bring that delta wave in at the same time you have that memory in, or if it's a trauma, which havening in general is much more focused on trauma. So you bring the trauma experience up and you haven, and the technical term is resolve. It resolves that pathway. In lay terms, it heals it or cures it. It heals the pathway. It dissolves it. It doesn't dissolve the nerves. It doesn't dissolve the neural pathway. This is the plasticity of the brain, the changeability of the brain. Now, if you don't do this, pathways remain intact for the rest of your life. And while they're intact in this particular part of the brain, in the amygdala, when you have danger, the response is to go to safety. Now, some people, often the oldest child, they'll have danger, stress, right? And it's repeated.
Yeah.
They see it as. So what they do, because they were the oldest child and always were helping mom get the younger ones together and all that, they're little born managers. Well, they're not born, they're made. So what do when they're stressed as an adult? They go to work. They work extra hours. They do really well. Of course, their family life suffers, but they do that. So the person who was taught as a child, we just say it's patterned or taught to be responsible, they're responsible at work. And the one, usually the youngest, who was taught to be freewheeling and the artistic and all that because they didn't have the responsibility of taking care of the brothers and sisters. When they're stressed, they go off and do something creative. So it's this patterning. It's very flexible and it responds to, or should I say, it mirrors the processes of your childhood. It mirrors that, but you can change it.
That is interesting. It is interesting, and the approach is quite different. So can you walk us through the results of your 2-year clinical trial on obesity? How did havening therapy contribute to the remarkable 85% success rate in helping the participants maintain long-term weight loss?
Absolutely. There's several really great questions in there. So thank you for that, Sana. First of all, we have to look at what our targets are. And we must recognize there's two major important targets. One is the question of why do I always gain the weight back when I diet? And the other is how do I lose the weight? So those are two real big things. Now, my work, I started off thinking, I was going to learn how to help people lose the weight. Well, that becomes a secondary issue. The primary issue is how do we resolve this brain issue? And that's where we have the 97% failure in regular programs. You see, 95% of people go into a regular program, whether it's therapy or social program, they lose the weight. They do. I mean, we know how to lose weight. Problem is they always gain it back. It's 97% failure in gaining it back. So that's the first big problem. Why are we gaining the weight? We understand this now. It's patterned in childhood. Then how do we heal that? So that's where the havening comes in. Now it takes, earliest is about 12 sessions. Normally is about 20 sessions, sometimes a little more. But these are hour-long sessions where we do about 30 minutes of actual havening. So not a one-time deal, but when we do the havening, as I explained a moment ago, what occurs is that it resolves those neural pathways. Those neural pathways become neutral. They're just now regular neural pathways, like you and I are talking and thinking, and you're listening and what have you. So pathways that have been used thousands and thousands of times are firing, and they're getting new information, but those pathways have been used and then they go back to neutral. They get used, they go back to neutral. Well, we're taking those permanent, what's called potentiated pathway or pattern pathway, and returning them back to neutral or naive. So through the process of havening, we gradually, but fairly quickly, turn those neural pathways into naive pathways. So it goes from patterned to unpatterned. So that's the part that keeps you from gaining weight again. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to lose, because weight loss can be quite complex. But so that's where I get the 85%. Now, the people who were raised with narcissistic mothers, or who were raised in often in, say, foster home or the state care, where they were never really comfortable, they were always threatened with abandonment. Those people have the hardest time to heal this. And they're often, by the way, the largest. They're your 450, 600-pound people. But it can be done. You have about, they're the lower end of the success. And the people who had hostile environments, narcissistic mothers, etc., they are the ones who have the first time. But the person who was raised in a good family, they respond very well. Dinner time might have been the best time for them. In the day after day after day, but they respond well because they had a loving family in general. So those are the people who I have the highest cure rate for, and that's where we're having 85%. And those, how do I get that? Is through their interviews. We do weekly interviews, or I did weekly interviews for up to 9 months with these people individually. And along the road there, where they start saying, well, I know I'm not overeating anymore. And I find myself easily or comfortably or even must quit when I'm full. And I never could quit before. So it starts off with they're recognizing they're full. They never recognized for years they didn't. Then they're saying it's easy to quit. They're telling themselves they're going to quit, and they do. It's easy. Then the next step is they go through and say, you know what? I just found I don't want to eat. I'm surprised. I'm giving table scraps to the dog, or I'm throwing food away. I could never do that before, but now I just don't want it. And that's the thing. I don't want the extra. Once I feel full, and they learn the signals of full because they hadn't for years, then they just no longer want to eat more. Now, out of that 85% who they come to that place, about half of them, so 40 something people out of the half of 85 that do it, they spontaneously, without doing anything, they spontaneously start gradually losing weight. About half don't, but the half that do not, the few that I've had in the program that have said, okay, I just don't overeat, but I'm not losing weight. They go on a additional weight loss program. They might go on Weight Watchers or some other social thing, and they, as we're working together, say, I can't believe how easy it is. I'm just using Weight Watchers as a tool to kind of help me plan my meals now, rather than the struggle. There's no more struggle. And anybody who's dieted, who's overweight or obese, who's dieted, and they force themselves to reduce, they understand that struggle. That struggle never lets go. It's this constant, just driving urge that won't let you relax, won't let go of you. That's what we call the food monster. That urge is your food monster. And for those people, it just seems to be gone. But when you dig into their personalities and their history, their weight is really quite complex, because at that level, you do get into diet, because there is a lot to healthy foods versus unhealthy foods. And the unhealthy foods do keep you heavy. The sugars do keep you eating. Sugar is a crossover between the part of obesity and addiction. Sugar is very addictive. And we have to understand that carbohydrates are a sugar. So that's where it can kind of get complex. But back to the basic thing, the people who are not in that area that are spontaneously weight loss, a goodly percent of them, and these are women in their 60s typically, they say, you know what, I've been overweight for 40 years. I've kind of given up on that whole being girly and cute and sexy. And I'm happy with just having my life back, or having the freedom, that emotional freedom that I don't need to eat. I don't come home and just can't wait to eat before even dinner's here. So that freedom is the first part. Then the weight loss becomes second. One thing I didn't say on you, because you asked about the program, the duration of the program, I started in January of 2022. So this is October of 24. So it's been going on for a little over 2 3/4 years, and I'm wrapping it up. I'm in the last few people, like I'm now talking to about 4 people who were the last cohort to come in on the weekly basis. We do weekly therapy. I'm doing the people who have been successful or failed, and the people who are successful. Now we're in either, we do 4 months of follow-up on a monthly basis, and after that, a couple of 6-month follow-ups. So we're getting longevity. So that's where and the number of people that went through the program was a little over 100. So that's the steady base over almost 3 years now.
That is super interesting, Jason, and thank you for explaining that. But yes, the therapy shows promising results, but there may be critics, I'm just speculating, who may question the long-term efficacy of this approach, labeling it maybe as unproven or pseudoscience.
Sure.
So how do you address such skepticism, especially in comparison to more established methods like CBT, that is cognitive behavioral therapy?
Well, it's very, very simple. At this point, I'm right at the edge of having longevity that matches CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. Now, as I started off with, CBT is it's Let's back up just 1 second. That is virtually all therapies, including all diets, work. We can lose weight on them. You go in with a motivation and you bring the motivation with you. You say, okay, I'm going to do this. And you sign up for cognitive behavior therapy, sign up for psychotherapy, sign up for a social program, you sign up for a dietary program. And it's your own internal motivation that gets you going and helps you follow whatever the advice is. But cognitive behavior therapy has no more success than, say, going on a particular diet. 18 months is the marker. 18 months of all types of therapy have a 97% failure rate. And so what do I say? Well, I smile and say, yeah, you're right. I can't say that this has the longevity because my research only started 2.75 years ago. My first people are now coming up on the 18, 20-month marker. Give me a couple of years. All right. And you know what? That's the way it is. That's the way research works. However, there a big difference. A fundamental difference is when you finish your cognitive behavior therapy or any of the therapies that I mentioned, at the end of it, when you finish, you're down your 10 or 100 pounds, then the next word is maintenance. How do I maintain this? What do I have to do to hold on to my weight loss? And you talk to anybody, especially somebody who is obese, meaning they're quite large, and what did you have to do to stay slim for the next year or 5 years, whatever it was? And they will tell you that they had to institute strict militaristic discipline. They had to hold on. They could never let themselves slip. Now, in my program, it's quite free. And one of the things I teach people is, look, a normal eater, the person who is normally thin, ask the question of them, do they ever overeat at a celebration? And of course they do. You know, for Americans and Europeans, is Christmas dinner. We all overeat and we all talk about, oh my God, I'm so full. While we're sitting there drinking a hot toddy or eggnog, which is just laden with calories. You know, we're just piling. But you watch the overweight eater the next day sitting next to the normal eater. The normal eater will push away halfway through the lunch, say, oh, it's so good, but I can't eat anymore. I'm full. Where the overweight person will eat everything. Now, that's because they have this food monster telling them they must clean their plate. Now, the difference here is that I tell my people, look, what's going to happen, and this is what we look for in the research. If you have a situation, a wedding or holiday or anything where you are going to overeat, or even in the office, somebody gets promoted, there's a retirement, whatever, and you're socially expected to have that piece of cake. You don't have to eat the whole cake, but if you do, what happens is pay attention to what you do the next day. And this is in my research, pay attention and tell me what happened the day after. And as they move through those steps I talked about earlier, where they become more and more a natural eater, they go, the next day I didn't eat until lunch. I just wasn't hungry. See, that's what the natural eater does. They overeat at holidays. They overeat, but they don't overeat the next day. They, in fact, undereat because their body just doesn't need any more fuel or any more food. Their cells at the cellular level are already full of glucose. So they don't want it and they push away from the food. That's the natural eater. And that's what my people do consistently. Okay. So it has changed the dynamic in the brain because we've taken the patterning out. So my theory at this point, and it's beginning to prove out because we're just now getting the longevity, that that's once that's changed, it's changed forever. Now, it's not just me saying this. We see havening is primarily a therapy for trauma. It heals trauma. It heals things like PTSD. Now, what we have a lot of research on and a lot of anecdotal data on is that you have a PTSD environment situation. Let's take something like a wartime, or you're in a horrible accident, car wreck, and you survive. Well, after the therapy with havening, where you, again, unpattern the brain. It's called depotentiation. Depotentiate that part of the brain, which is, again, the amygdala. When that's done, for the rest of your life, it's done. You don't have, whenever you see that black SUV that was the one that you
Yes.
looked at, but you get see the next SUV, you don't break out into chills or the sweats. Or if you're a veteran, and when you hear the on the TV somebody's blowing up stuff, you don't dive under the table. That is done for life. So we know that this repatterning the brain through neuroplasticity is permanent.
Mm.
I've applied that therapy in a new arena.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Lovely, lovely, Jason. And before we wrap up, for listeners who may be struggling with emotional eating and weight gain, what practical first steps can they take to begin healing the root cause rather than just focusing on losing weight?
There's a couple. The first and foremost, the one that's most important is, and I have to be careful with this statement, but the first thing is forgive yourself. It's not
Mm.
your That's not license to say it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. I'm not giving you license just to go binge and put on 100 pounds. That's not it. Just forgive yourself. Yeah, at this point, you still have to control it. You still have to do the misery, but forgive yourself. It's not your fault. It was patterned in childhood and it's non linguistic. It doesn't understand language. It's simply so. Start reducing your stress as best as you can. And that would mean without going through my program and actually getting the havening, what can you do? Well, forgive yourself. Secondly, focus on getting much of the stress out. You're an emotional eater. So get the stress out where you're not as emotional. So take some classes. This is outside of my work, but take some classes. Take some meditation, yoga, whatever it is that works for you. Go for walks in nature. And if that means just go for a walk in the park, everybody lives close enough to a park, or wherever it is, get around greenery, get around nature and walk and relax. Put that into your daily basis. And then there's other things. So spend some time, do a couple of researches, do a search on YouTube or whatever,
Mhm.
and learn what sounds really good to you to relax your mind. So you can start there. So you're no longer triggering that response. You haven't healed anything, you haven't done that, but you're no longer triggering the response. So that would be the first place without going through any therapy or without any actual further research. Next
Hmm.
thing would be look at, do some searches on Havening itself, learn what this is all about.
Great. That's really great, Jason. And if our listeners want to connect with you, explore more about the havening therapy and the practical tips to address the root cause of emotional eating and weight gain, how they can do that.
You can contact me via email on my website. And my website is Never Gain the Weight Back. And there's a email address there. Just contact me via that. I am just now, because the research is wrapped up, I'm just now beginning to take clients. So if somebody wants to work with me directly, contact me. Um, and I'm also opening a new podcast myself, which will be out
Yeah.
within the month. Yeah, it's real exciting. Um,
Yeah, it is.
I was written books in the past, but this time I'm starting off with a video. So just watch for that. And it will be called Food Monster. Food Monster Freedom on YouTube. And it's not there yet, but it will be very, very soon. Food Monster Freedom. And we'll start explaining all that stuff.
Hmm. That is really, really great. Podcasting is a great way to spread awareness at a global level. So all the best to you and congratulations, Jason. And we'll mention all the details in the show notes for our listeners. And thank you so much for sharing your incredible knowledge, your hard work, and your insights with all of us today, and your approach to healing the root cause of emotional eating rather than just treating the symptoms. It offers hope. The word hope that is so powerful to so many of us who feel trapped in the cycle of weight gain. So, thank you so much once again for coming on the show and helping us spread the word.
I sure appreciate you allowing me to answer those good questions. So I hope to see you again soon.
Great, great. And for our listeners, I encourage you to explore the resources Jason has mentioned in this conversation. And you can refer the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to tune into the future episodes of the Mindful Living podcast, where we continue to explore powerful tools for personal transformation with interesting and exciting conversations with guests like Jason. And thank you so much to everyone for listening. And until next time, stay mindful, stay healthy, stay joyful. Thank you.